A sudden scream split the quiet of the darkened room. It was sharp and desperate, echoing off the cold walls. Noah's heart raced, pounding against his chest. His breath caught in his throat, and his eyes scanned the empty room. There was no one there. The fear clung to him, a constant weight on his shoulders. The air felt thick, as though something unseen was lurking just beyond his reach. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the room, bending and shifting in ways that made no sense. He wanted to call out, but the words stuck in his throat. His hands trembled as they gripped the edge of the table, and the sound of a door creaking open sent a chill crawling down his spine. Was it real? Was it his mind? Or was something in the room with him, watching him, waiting? The oppressive silence was broken only by the faint sound of his own breathing. He had to get out, but the door, it was locked. The room felt smaller, as though closing in around him. His pulse quickened. Something was here, and it wasn't leaving. Noah paced the room, his thoughts racing as fast as his heartbeat. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was in the room with him, watching, waiting. His mind tried to rationalize it. Was it just the stress, or was he losing his grip on reality? He needed to leave, but the door wouldn't budge. The locked door. He looked at it again, desperate, but it remained immovable. Sweat trickled down his forehead. He wiped it away with his sleeve. The air was suffocating, thick with the scent of stale air and old wood. Every sound seemed amplified. The faintest creak of the floorboard, the soft rustle of the curtains. Then came the whisper. Faint at first, a whisper so quiet he thought it was just the wind. But it wasn't the wind. The voice was distinct. It sounded like someone speaking right behind him. He froze. His heart thundered in his chest, and a shiver ran down his spine. Noah, the voice whispered again. His breath caught in his throat. Noah stopped. The whisper had been unmistakable. It wasn't his imagination. The voice was real. Panic surged through him. His body tensed, his mind racing for answers. But no solution came. He could feel the air shift around. Something was in the room. He turned slowly, his back pressed against the cold wall. He didn't know what he was expecting to see. The room was still, yet it felt alive, as though the shadows themselves were watching him. The silence was deafening. He took a step toward the door again, but a sudden, loud crash made him jump back. A picture frame on the wall had fallen, the glass shattering on the floor. Noah stood frozen, staring at the shattered frame, his breath shallow. He didn't want to look, but he had to. His hand reached toward the door again, fingers brushing the handle. He pulled. The door stayed locked. And then, the whisper came again. Noah. The voice had grown louder, closer. Noah's skin crawled. He could feel it now. The presence in the room, as though something was right behind him, breathing down his neck. But when he turned around, the room was empty. No one was there. Just the shadows. Just the silence. He could still hear the whisper, though faint but persistent. It filled his head, drowning out everything else. You can't escape, Noah. The voice was cold, flat, void of any warmth or emotion. It was as if the very air was alive and speaking to him, taunting him. He staggered back, his back colliding with the wall. The room felt smaller, the walls inching closer. Panic clawed at his throat. He had to leave. He had to escape. But the door, he turned to look at it again. The door was locked. The lock had never budged. It was as if the room itself had become a prison. Noah turned again, his mind racing. The silence was crushing. The door, the shadows, the whispering voice. All of it was too much. He felt himself starting to break, the weight of the fear pressing down on him, suffocating him. Noah. The voice came again, unmistakable. He couldn't take it anymore. Desperation surged through him. He turned toward the window, hoping for an escape. But the glass was too high. There was no way out. He was trapped, stuck in this nightmare with no escape. Every shadow seemed to come alive, moving toward him, surrounding him. He reached for the door once more, his hand shaking violently. This time, the door didn't remain still. The handle turned. Noah felt the cold sweat on his skin as he moved further into the house. The house seemed endless, each hallway twisting like a maze. Shadows loomed at every corner, dark shapes that didn't belong. He couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper in the wind, made his pulse race. The silence was too heavy, too thick. It pressed down on him, suffocating him. He turned, thinking he saw something in the distance, but it was only a fleeting glimpse, a shadow darting across the wall. "Get a grip," he muttered under his breath, trying to calm his frayed nerves. But the air felt alive, thick with the presence of something unseen. He couldn't see it, but he could feel it, right behind him, in the dark corners, waiting. It was real. It was hunting him. Noah quickened his pace, the echo of his footsteps bouncing back from the walls. He had to escape before it was too late. Noah stopped in his tracks. The whispering voice, soft at first, had returned. It was close now, echoing from the very walls. Noah. The sound slithered into his mind, cold and chilling. He spun around, his heart racing, but no one was there. His breath came in shallow gasps as the house seemed to close in on him. He could hear footsteps, slow, deliberate, as if someone was walking toward him. But the hall was empty. The air turned cold, freezing his breath in the dim light. His skin prickled, every hair standing on end. He wasn't sure if it was the house itself or something else, but something was wrong. His eyes darted nervously from shadow to shadow. He had to leave, but every way seemed to lead deeper into the maze. He tried to push the door open, but it was locked. He felt trapped, his mind slipping further into terror. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Noah's heartbeat thundered in his ears, drowning out everything else. He turned, trying to find the source, but it was just shadows and silence. He was losing his mind. The walls felt like they were pressing in on him. His body felt numb, the fear freezing him in place. "Get out of here," he shouted. But the house only echoed back his own words. The walls creaked, groaned, as though the house was alive, breathing with him. The whispering voice grew more distinct. "You can't escape, Noah." The words were like ice, cutting through him. His feet stumbled as he turned again, eyes wide, searching the empty hallway. There was nothing, only more darkness, more whispers, and the crushing weight of something unseen, stalking him. Noah stumbled backward, his breath coming in gasps. He could feel it now, closing in on him. The house was no longer just a place, it had become a living nightmare. He reached for the door again, desperate to escape, but it wouldn't open. The whisper came again, sharp and clear. "You will never leave." The words wrapped around him like chains, locking him in place. His hands pressed against the door, the cold wood burning his skin. He could feel the presence behind him, a weight, a pull, something drawing him deeper into the dark. The silence was broken only by the sound of his own frantic breathing. The air was so thick he could barely breathe. He felt as though the house itself was swallowing him whole. The walls, the shadows, everything had become a part of the nightmare. The door finally gave way with a creak, but Noah hesitated. He turned, glancing over his shoulder one last time before stepping into the unknown. The house was alive, the very walls watching him. He had no idea what was behind him now. The air was thick, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to keep moving. The voice echoed in his mind, taunting him, pushing him forward. "It's too late, Noah. You can't hide." The words clung to him, growing louder with each step. He ran, not knowing where to go, only that he had to get away. The house seemed to bend, shift, as if it was playing a cruel game. Every hallway twisted. Every door led to another nightmare. Noah kept moving, his legs growing heavy, his breath labored. He had to escape. He couldn't stop now. Noah's heart hammered in his chest as the figure loomed before him, its presence suffocating the air around him. He backed away slowly, his feet stumbling, but his legs were weak, trembling beneath him. The air was cold, unbearably cold, and his breath fogged in the dim light. The shadows moved, alive, shifting with the figure's every step. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a whisper of terror. The figure did not answer. It only stood there, its shape stretching impossibly tall, its form a dark blur against the pale light. Noah's pulse raced faster as he realized he couldn't escape it. The room was closing in. There was nowhere to run. "You can't hide," the figure finally spoke, its voice like ice, sending a shiver down Noah's spine. His mind spun, every instinct screaming to flee, but his body refused to obey. Noah's breath caught in his throat as the figure moved toward him. Each step it took was slow, deliberate, but it was as if the air itself bent to its will. "Stay away," Noah whispered, his voice breaking. He wanted to scream, but the words wouldn't come. His legs felt numb as he staggered backward. He reached out for the wall, but it felt miles away. The temperature dropped, and the chill bit at his skin. The figure's hand reached toward him, and with each inch closer, his heart pounded harder. The fear that had been creeping in now gripped him entirely. "You are mine now," the figure said, its voice a cold, hollow whisper that seemed to echo in Noah's mind. The room swirled around him as if everything was spinning out of control. The walls seemed to close in, and the light flickered out completely. The figure's touch was freezing, its hand gripping Noah's shoulder. The cold sank deep into his skin, numbing him from the inside out. Noah gasped, his chest tight, as the figure's breath washed over him like a wave of ice. "Please, let me go," Noah begged, his voice barely audible. His head was spinning. He could feel the weight of the house pressing down on him, the walls closing in tighter. The figure's face remained a blur, but Noah could feel its presence, the overwhelming force that seemed to drown him in darkness. The figure leaned in, its breath cold on Noah's ear. "You can never leave. You are mine now, Noah." The words echoed in his mind louder and louder, until they drowned out all other thoughts. His mind felt like it was shattering, splintering under the weight of the terror. Noah's legs buckled, and he collapsed to the floor, his body trembling. His mind felt like it was splitting in two, the fear and the cold overwhelming him. The figure was still there, its presence looming over him. Noah could feel it watching him, its unseen eyes burning into his soul. He tried to crawl away, his hands scraping against the cold floor, but the house seemed to twist, pulling him back. "Get away from me," he screamed, his voice hoarse. But the figure remained silent, motionless, as though it had all the time in the world. The shadows around him deepened, stretching toward him like tendrils, closing him in. The figure's whisper came again, softer this time, but no less menacing. "It's too late." Noah could feel the walls pushing in on him, the room suffocating him, and the cold seemed to freeze the air in his lungs. Noah's vision blurred, his mind fractured under the weight of terror. He couldn't think, couldn't move. The house, the figure, the shadows, they all felt like one unending nightmare. The wall seemed to shift, the floor beneath him vibrating with an unnatural force. Noah's mind screamed for him to wake up, but he knew he couldn't. This wasn't a dream. This was real. The figure leaned down, its form becoming clearer, but still indistinct, its face hidden in the darkness. "You belong to me now, Noah," it said again, the words like a final blow to his sanity. He wanted to scream, but no sound came. The cold seeped into his bones, into his soul, freezing him in place. He felt himself slipping into the darkness, unable to escape. He had failed. There was no way out. Noah's heart was still racing, the terror from the figure's cold touch still lingering on his skin. He couldn't believe what had just happened. The house was alive, twisted in ways he couldn't understand. Every corner seemed to hide something darker. He moved cautiously through the hallways, his footsteps echoing in the dead silence. It felt like the house itself was waiting for him, watching him with eyes that were not human. A chill swept over him, colder than before. His breath fogged in the air as he walked deeper into the house. "You can't hide," the voice whispered again, and Noah froze. His mind screamed at him to turn back, to escape. But there was nowhere to go. The house was closing in on him. The only thing he could do now was push forward. Every step felt heavier, like the very walls were pulling him deeper into their nightmare. Noah stopped in front of a door, his hand hovering over the handle. Something about this room felt different, darker. His instincts screamed at him to leave, but he couldn't. He had to find answers. The silence in the house was suffocating. The air was thick, heavy, pressing down on him. He took a deep breath and turned the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a dark room that seemed to stretch on forever. As Noah stepped inside, the air felt colder, and the shadows seemed to grow, curling around him like a living thing. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears as he moved further in. "It's too late to stop now," the voice whispered again, but this time Noah didn't turn to face it. He had to face whatever lay ahead. There was no turning back. Inside the room, the air was thick with dust. The floor creaked beneath Noah's feet, and the smell of decay filled his nostrils. It looked like an old study, abandoned long. Bookshelves lined the walls, but the books were brittle and covered in layers of dust. The only light came from a single flickering candle in the far corner, casting long shadows on the walls. Noah stepped forward, his footsteps echoing in the quiet. His hand reached out to touch one of the books, but as soon as his fingers brushed the cover, the door slammed shut behind him. The sound was deafening, causing Noah to jump. Panic surged through him as he tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Something was wrong. The house was toying with him, and he couldn't escape. The whispering voice came again, louder this time. "You will never leave." He turned around, heart racing. The house seemed to shake as the whisper grew louder, turning into a chorus of voices. Noah's breath quickened as he turned to look at the walls, which were closing in on him. The once quiet room now seemed alive, vibrating with energy. Panic surged through him as the shadows shifted, twisting around him like chains. The whispers surrounded him, louder and louder, until they drowned out his thoughts. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. His vision blurred as the room seemed to collapse in on itself, growing smaller and darker with every passing second. The walls creaked and groaned, as though the house itself was alive and angry. "You can't escape," the voice hissed. Noah staggered back, his legs giving out beneath him. He collapsed to the floor, his hands pressed against his ears, trying to block out the voices. Noah's mind was shattering. The whispers were relentless, overwhelming him with their voices. He could feel himself being pulled deeper into the darkness, his body refusing to move. He knew, deep down, that he couldn't escape. The house had him. The figure was everywhere, its presence suffocating him. "Please," Noah begged, his voice barely a whisper. "Let me go." But the house didn't care. The walls pressed against him. The floor beneath him buckled, and the darkness consumed him. He closed his eyes, bracing for the end, but instead he felt a shift. The pressure released for just a moment, and he took his chance. With every ounce of strength left in him, he pushed forward, crawling toward the door. The whispering voices faded into the distance as he made his way out, but he knew this was just the beginning. There was still more to face, and the nightmare wasn't over. Noah's breathing was heavy, his heart pounding in his chest as he stumbled through the dark hallway. His body was battered, bruised from his journey through the house, but he could still feel the presence lurking behind him. The walls felt closer, as though the house itself was contracting, squeezing the life out of him. The whispering voice had faded, but the oppressive silence that replaced it was far worse. Every step he took echoed through the empty corridors, amplifying his fear. He had to escape, had to find a way out of this nightmare. But the deeper he ventured, the more the house seemed to shift, its layout twisting, changing. Every door led him to another dead end. "Please," he whispered to himself, his mind unraveling. "It's not over. I can't keep running." But there was no choice. He had to move. The house wasn't going to let him go. Noah's hands shook as he reached for another door, his fingers trembling with the weight of his fear. The door creaked open, revealing another empty room. It was small, with peeling wallpaper and a faint musty smell, but something was different. The air was colder here, almost freezing, and the shadows seemed to twist unnaturally around the edges. He stepped in cautiously, feeling the weight of the silence pressing against him. As he moved further into the room, he saw it, a figure standing in the corner, almost invisible in the dark. His heart skipped a beat. "Not you again," he whispered, but the figure didn't move. It simply stood there watching him. The room grew colder still, and Noah felt the familiar, suffocating presence of whatever force had been hunting him. He wasn't alone anymore. Noah froze in place, unable to move as the figure slowly turned toward him. The cold in the room deepened, and he could see his breath fogging in the air. He wanted to scream, but no sound came. The figure's face was obscured by the shadows, but Noah could feel its eyes on him, watching, waiting. He took a step back, but the room seemed to stretch, making the distance to the door impossibly far. The whispers returned, louder now, echoing from the walls. "You belong here," the voice murmured. And Noah's mind raced. He couldn't stay here, couldn't face whatever this was, but his legs wouldn't move. Panic flooded him. The room seemed to close in around him, suffocating him. He couldn't breathe. He needed to escape, but the house wasn't going to let him. Noah's hands trembled as he turned to run, but his feet felt like they were glued to the floor. His mind was racing, trying to find a way out, but it was too late. The room shifted again, and the door that had been behind him now seemed miles away. The walls seemed to stretch and twist, distorting his perception of reality. He ran toward the door, but the house itself seemed to fight him, pushing him back with each step. "Let me out," he shouted, but his voice was swallowed by the oppressive silence. He could feel the figure moving closer, its presence growing stronger. "You can't leave," it whispered again. Noah's chest tightened, and he turned to face the figure once more. His vision blurred, but he could still see it, standing just inches away. It was inevitable now. The house had claimed him. Noah fell to his knees, the weight of exhaustion and fear overwhelming him. The figure was right in front of him now, its cold, lifeless gaze fixed on him. He could feel the cold creeping into his bones, into his soul. "Please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please, let me go." But the figure did not speak. It simply reached out, its hand icy and unfeeling, touching his face. Noah felt his body go numb, the cold seeping into every fiber of his being. He couldn't move, couldn't scream. The house had won, There was no escape. The last thing he felt before everything went dark was the chilling touch of the figure's hand. And then, nothing. Noah's eyes snapped open, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The darkness around him felt thicker than before, as though it was pressing in on him from all sides. The cold that had consumed him earlier seemed to have receded, but something was still there. He could feel it, just out of reach, lingering in the corners of his mind. "Is this it?" he whispered to himself, unsure of what to believe anymore. The house had taken everything from him, and yet he felt as though there was more to come. His head spun as he tried to piece together his fractured thoughts. He should have been relieved to wake up, but there was no comfort in the silence, no relief from the suffocating presence that haunted every inch of this place. He pushed himself off the cold, hard floor and stood up, unsure of where to go next. The house was still here. He was still trapped. And whatever it was that pursued him wasn't done. He tried to steady his breathing, but his heart wouldn't slow. Every sound in the room felt amplified, echoing in his ears. It was as if the house was watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake. "Where do I go now?" he thought aloud, his voice breaking the silence. There was no way out. The door that had once seemed like a way to escape was now gone, vanished into the shadows. He had searched every corner, every room, but it was as if the house itself had shifted, reshaped itself. His mind raced as he tried to figure out how to break free, but the more he thought, the more hopeless it felt. The terror he had experienced wasn't over. It had only just begun. He couldn't outrun it. Not anymore. The whispers returned, but this time they weren't just in his mind. The voices filled the room, swirling around him like a storm. "You can't leave, Noah." The words were clear, but they didn't come from anywhere he could see. The shadows on the walls began to shift, moving in ways that were impossible, twisting like smoke in the air. Noah backed away, his eyes wide with terror as the room seemed to close in on. "Please," he whispered, his throat tight. He couldn't breathe. He could feel the pressure building around him, the walls inching closer with each breath he took. He ran, but the room stretched out, the walls moving with him. No matter which direction he turned, he kept running in circles, the shadows always just behind him. The whispers followed him, never stopping. He was trapped in this nightmare, and it was tightening its grip. Noah fell to his knees, his legs unable to carry him any longer. He gasped for air, his chest burning as the cold air seemed to choke him. The shadows were everywhere now, filling the room, suffocating him. I can't take this anymore," he muttered, his voice hoarse. His body felt numb, his hands shaking as he tried to push himself up. The weight of the house was unbearable. The darkness pressed against him, and the whispers grew louder, surrounding him. He could barely hear his own thoughts over the sound of the house closing in on him. "Please, let me go," he begged. But the house didn't answer. It only grew darker, colder. The figure that had haunted him since the beginning was here, standing just behind him. He could feel it watching him, waiting for him to give in. And in that moment, Noah realized he had already lost. The darkness seemed to swallow him whole. Noah's thoughts were disjointed, swirling in a haze of fear and exhaustion. He couldn't see, couldn't move. His mind was a blur of memories, fragmented images of his past, and the horrors he had faced in this house. He wanted to scream, to cry out, but his voice was lost in the suffocating silence. The house had won. There was no escape, no way out. The figure's cold hand reached out and touched his shoulder, sending a jolt of icy fear through his body. And then, as if time had stopped, the darkness overwhelmed him. Everything went silent. Everything went still. Noah knew with a terrifying certainty that this was the end. The house had taken him, body and soul, and nothing would be the same again. Noah's eyes fluttered open, his mind disoriented, trying to make sense of the suffocating darkness around him. He couldn't tell where he was anymore. The house had changed. The familiar hallways, the cold, and the silence had all merged into something worse. The whispers were gone, but the feeling remained. The weight of it. The pressure. He could still feel the presence of the house's malevolent force, lingering, watching him from the shadows. The walls seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if the house itself was breathing. He tried to stand, but his legs were weak. The air was thick, and it clung to him, making it hard to move. He could barely hear his own thoughts over the overwhelming sensation of dread. There was no escape, but somehow, Noah knew that the nightmare wasn't finished. It would never be finished. Noah forced himself to his feet, despite the heavy weight of his fear. The walls loomed around him, pressing in from every side. His mind was numb, but he pushed forward step by step. "I have to keep moving," he whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was trying to convince. The house seemed to warp around him, its walls stretching, twisting in impossible ways. It wasn't a house anymore. It was a prison, and Noah was its captive. He turned a corner, his eyes scanning for any hint of an exit, but all he saw were more of the same. Shadows, darkness, silence. "There's no way out," he muttered, the thought sinking in like a weight in his chest. His legs wobbled and his vision blurred. The room felt colder with each passing moment, the air thick with something sinister. The house wasn't just trapping him. It was feeding on his fear. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of Noah's own breathing. He reached out to touch the wall, hoping for some kind of anchor, but his fingers brushed against the cold, damp surface. He recoiled, a shiver running down his spine. "Is this real?" he whispered, his voice shaking. The house had swallowed him whole, and now it was playing tricks on him, distorting his senses. He could feel the presence of something watching him, something just beyond the edge of his perception. Every step felt like it took him deeper into the house's grasp. And then, the whisper came again, softer this time, like a breath against his ear. "You belong here." The words were a final death sentence, and Noah knew, with a sickening certainty, that the house would never let him go. Noah's legs buckled beneath him as the overwhelming presence of the house pressed in, suffocating him. He fell to his knees, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I can't do this," he muttered, the words barely audible. But the house didn't care. It wasn't finished with him. The air grew colder, the darkness thicker. The whispers returned, louder now, echoing from every direction. "It's too late," they chanted in unison. "Oh, you're ours." Noah's mind swam, the fear rising in his chest like a tidal wave. He could feel himself slipping, his grip on reality fading. The room spun, and the walls seemed to breathe, as though the house was alive, consuming him, piece by piece. He tried to scream, but his voice was lost in the endless void around him. Noah's mind was breaking, his thoughts fractured and scattered. The room, the house, the shadows, they were all merging into one overwhelming entity. There was no distinction between himself and the nightmare he had been living. He was part of it now. "I never wanted this," he whispered, his voice barely audible. But the house didn't care about his pleas. It had taken everything from him, and now it was claiming him entirely. The walls closed in, the shadows engulfing him, until he could see nothing, hear nothing. The final whisper came, cold and final. "You are home." And in that moment, Noah understood. He was never leaving. He was trapped in the dark, forever.